Interesting topic, and I thought I'd start by just letting you know why I picked this particular topic, and it's something that's close to my heart. So professionally, I work with brands, company brands. I've been doing that for about 20 years now, so I help them discover what their purpose is, how they manifest that in the world, how they express that through many different ways, and that's because I'm fundamentally interested in behavior. In my academic life, my background is in sociology. I've always been fascinated by behavior. So what's the invisible hand that guides our decisions and our direction in life? And how does that ladder up in society? And I have a specific interest in digital sociology. So I'm interested in how tech is transforming our lives and how that's informing our behavior and how that's creating societies. And not just human behavior, but how do devices talk to each other? How do artifacts talk to each other? What's the social life of digital objects? These are the things that really fascinate me. So the fact that we're able to talk about artificial intelligence right now is a gift for me being alive at this time, and why I find the subject so interesting. So I wanted to pull out a quote by Yuval Noah Harari, who you're probably familiar with. He's a historian, and he talks about, he has the benefit of longitude, so he thinks about obviously history, but what it means for our future. And he has this wonderful quote: history began when humans invented gods and will end when humans become gods. And I don't wish to offend anyone by using the G word, but he raises a very interesting point around we now have the ability to create life, to design life, to do things that years ago, hundreds of years ago, we would have thought only gods can do. And now we have the ability to do that. It's an exciting time. It's also maybe quite a scary time. And on one side of the equation, there's a very utopian view of what artificial intelligence will bring us. There's this idea that we will all be flying around in cars, we'll be having our self-healing pods at home, we'll be able to do all of these amazing things that we never imagined we'd be able to do. They will make our lives better, happier, more successful, more productive, all of these great things. But on the other side of the equation, there's also a very dystopian view, which is that we will reach a stage where we become redundant and where artificial intelligence and machines will take over the world, and what will our place be? They will displace us. And I don't know if anyone saw the film Ex Machina. I would recommend it if you haven't. But that will be a wake-up call if ever you need one and you support this kind of point of view. And closer to home, a lot of you in the audience here today and at the event will maybe be running your own businesses, or you'll be coders, or you'll be developing startups, you'll be CEOs of the future. Last week, Jack Ma, who runs Alibaba, one of the most successful businesses in the world, talked about in 30 years' time, the best chief exec will be a robot. The jobs that may be hollowed out through technology won't just be low-level jobs. Perhaps there won't be the kind of jobs in the future that we think we're aspiring to today. Last year, the World Economic Forum published their top 9 ethical issues in artificial intelligence. Don't ask me why there weren't 10. It feels like they should have gone one further. But their top point was, how do we stay in control of a complex, intelligent system? And we don't really have the answer to that. We don't know. It's unknown territory for us, and we will be discovering the answers together. Nick Bostrom is an Oxford philosopher, and he has a somewhat negative view of what artificial intelligence will mean, because he doesn't think we're ready. Doesn't believe that we're able to understand what we can do with artificial intelligence in a way that means it won't be disruptive and negative for us. He's written a best-selling book, Superintelligence. People like Bill Gates and Elon Musk recommend it. And he effectively feels like we're juggling with knives. We're children juggling with knives. We don't know what the outcomes are going to be, intended or otherwise, and we need to be very careful with this. So with all this context and all of these things going on in the world, how do we find our way? Who do we look for advice? Historically, we might have looked towards governments, and we might have thought nation states would look after us in this respect, but they're somewhat handicapped. They're not moving at the same pace as technology. They're bureaucratic institutions. They're different around the world. They have different agendas. So perhaps they are not going to give us the answers. Perhaps we shouldn't trust them to give us the answers. Then you have the FANGs, I think they're called. So Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. These businesses are worth $1.5 trillion, according to Wall Street. In the first 4 months of this year, they added $250 billion to their value, more than the GDP of Ireland, where a lot of my family come from. Can we put ourselves in their hands? Are they going to help us navigate our way? Are they going to help save us in some way? They have their own problems to deal with. Some of them perhaps seemingly trivial. Google, in terms of where your ads are placed, maybe you don't want it to show up next to something else that you don't believe in. Uber, disrupting an interesting a kind of industry. Not quite sure what they're going to be replacing these destroyed jobs with, according to some people. Facebook, fake news. Would they have acted if their people didn't demand that they do? Amazon, there's been an interesting case recently where Amazon Echo was kind of subpoenaed as part of a murder case for information, raises questions about privacy laws. But there is some hope. The big tech businesses realize they have some kind of obligation, although they didn't necessarily start or sign up for that in the beginning. But they do recognize this, and they've been working with policymakers. In the last Obama administration, a lot of work was done in terms of a white paper of how these things would come together and create the kind of ethics that could make a difference in the future. So with government, tech businesses, policymakers, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for us as individuals? Do we have agency? Do we have currency in all of this? We're not inert. We certainly do. And I think the starting point for a lot of us, especially if we're involved in creating tech businesses or informing them in some way, one thing we have to recognize is that tech is never neutral. It has never been neutral. And if you're a coder in this room, or if you're influencing a business based on tech, you know this. Our biases are moving online. It's a fact. You see it every day. And so the thing that occupies my mind a lot at the moment is, what's the difference between intelligence versus consciousness? So with intelligence, we're making faster machines that are able to do a lot of the kind of hard, machine-like learning work for us. Consciousness is a bit different. So if you talk to neuroscientists right now, they can take the brain apart, they can atomize it, they can tell you what different pieces of it do. Not all of the pieces yet, but they can give you quite a serious study in that. What they can't tell you is where consciousness comes from. At what point do we become conscious of our decisions, how they play out, why we do the things that we do? They don't understand that yet. And if they don't understand it, how can we understand it? And if we're creating things that could be on a continuum to becoming conscious, then that's something that we should think about. So in my view, developing artificial intelligence should be a conscious act. It should be our most conscious act. Because a bit like Nick Bostrom says, we don't know what we don't know yet. And that's a dangerous place to be unless you're very thoughtful about the effect of what you're going to be doing. But I truly believe that all of us can make a difference in this. I don't think that we can expect someone else is going to answer all these questions for us. I think we're going to do it. We're going to need to do it together, and we're going to need to do it very quickly. It's going to take a lot of creativity. The one thing we all know is that the machines are not best placed right now to be able to be as creative as human beings are able to be. And my colleague at Wolff Olins, E.J. Wakori, does a very nice talk online around why creativity is one of the things that will make such a huge difference. And maybe not save us, but certainly enhance our experience of artificial intelligence. It's certainly going to take some optimism. And I take a very optimistic view of what artificial intelligence could do for us in the future. And that we don't have to think of this as a black and white subject. It could be bad, it could be good. But we could become very enhanced working with technology. Whether it's in a physical sense or whether it's through our brains. You can imagine in the future where you might be able to harness the power of technology or integrate it with us in some way, which means that we become a better sense of ourselves working together. We have a reptilian mind as well as our more conscious one, and sometimes you need some help overriding some of our kind of weaker parts of ourselves. technology could really help us do that if we approach it with the right kind of spirit and optimism. And I think it's going to take an awful lot of heart, and I use that word advisedly. These are all very human qualities that I think we'll want to demonstrate as we are on the journey to develop artificial intelligence. There are a lot of people who are not represented in this room, a lot of people who don't have access to technology in the way that we do. And so it's on us to make sure that their interests are represented, not just our own, and for us to think about this in a very collective sense. And I wanted to end my little talk today thinking about the Second World War, which might be an unusual thing to share. My great-grandmother, I was very close to when I was young. She was a young woman during the Second World War. It was a pivotal moment in her life. It was an emancipation from servitude in a lot of ways. She worked in a parachute factory. She married an Australian RAF guy that she met and emigrated to Australia. She was on the beaches when soldiers came back from Dunkirk. Someone died in her arms. It was a big moment. So I was very close to those stories as a very young child. And in 1961, Adolf Eichmann was put on trial for war crimes. He'd been captured in Venezuela. He was taken to Jerusalem. And there was a cultural and political theorist called Hannah Arendt who covered his trial. And she was a German Jew. She was displaced during the war. She escaped through France, went to the US. During his trial, he was effectively the chief kind of technocrat of the Holocaust. He was tasked with making the trains run on time. He wasn't tasked with making the trains run on time. He was tasked with operationalizing the mass destruction of human beings. And when he was asked about this, he said, "How could I have known? How could I have known?" And a lot of people at the time said, if he had had more empathy, if people had had more empathy and care, they would have realized what was happening. They would have done things differently. And Hannah Arendt made herself a little bit unpopular by saying she didn't think it had anything to do with empathy at all. She said Eichmann's worst failing was not the absence of empathy, it was actually the absence of thought. And if he'd stopped to think and to be a bit more thoughtful, we might have been in a different position. And so my invitation to all of us, myself, all of us, is to give this topic a lot more thought, to think about the agency that you have. It's such a big subject. And if Yuval Harari or the equivalent in however many years is looking back through history, I think we'd all want to make sure that we're definitely on the right side of it. And so let's make sure we are. Let's each do something about that. That's it. Thank you.